And then it's here.
Here, yep. So if you click that, you want to pick this one because that's the thing you want to share, right?
Yeah, well, we're going to pretend that's the thing I want to share.
Yeah.
Because I have to have the document open.
Yeah, so it'll be...
Let's take that one down. I want to share this one.
Yeah, so it's going to be what? So it's basically you're choosing between this screen, and that screen.
Right.
It's not. Yeah. So
why is it not showing that?
That's it right there.
That's not it.
Yeah, click it.
That's not it. I can tell you that's a calendar.
But you just closed out all your things. So click out of here again. Now click again. There.
That's
See.
what I want to share.
Yeah.
And then they will see it.
Yeah.
It says you're sharing.
Yeah. Oh, stop sharing.
Oh.
Hey, Bill, good to see you. Thanks
Hi,
for
Mike. How
coming.
are you? Pleasure to be here. Nice
Good,
to see you. It was nice to see you in person a couple weeks ago or so.
especially at the beach. I guess you're used to the beach, in the desert
Where,
here.
where I am, but now I'm in Tallahassee and the beach is a good 30, 40 minutes away.
Uh,
So I'm not too far, but I miss it. I used to live within 1 block of the beach, so I
yeah,
I, I became spoiled.
yeah.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you're well.
Morning.
Everybody hear me okay? Just want to do a real quick technology check. We're good? All right. Well, it looks like we're all here and it's 11 o'clock on the dot. So I want to call the Nevada Common Interest Communities Task Force meeting of the Department of Business and Industry. Open the meeting here on April 14th at 11 o'clock. With that, turn it over to Letty for our roll call.
Letty Chavez for the record. Director Christopher Sanchez.
Here.
John Osanetti.
Here.
Michael Buckley.
Here.
Jason Horn. Jason Horn. Assembly Member Heidi Kasama. Assembly Member Heidi Kasama. Garrett Gordon.
Morning, present.
Morning. Doug Flowers.
Here.
David Barron.
Here.
Mark Leone.
Here.
Phil Su.
Here.
Crystal Park Keegan.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Sonia Merriweather.
Here.
And Sharath Chandra.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Letty. Moving on to agenda item number 2, that's public comment. I'd like to ask everybody to please mute your mics if you could. We have received public comment for the record of Mike Kosar, Paul DeLong Cruz, and Judy Hendrickson. If you are on and have submitted materials and I did not mention your name, just please follow up with us and we'll make sure that they get distributed to the task force members. With that, I'll turn it over to Amanda to facilitate public comment.
Good morning. Just a quick note on public comments. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person at the discretion of the chair. Members of the public are encouraged to address the task force regarding any matter. However, no action may be taken on a matter. Comment may not be limited based on viewpoint. If you're making a public comment via phone, dial-in number is 775-321-6111. Conference ID is 852-569-574#. And if you are joining virtually, please raise your hand if you would like to provide public comment, and I will go in order of who raised their hand first. Okay, it looks like we don't have any public comment. Oh, one moment, please. I will set the timer for 3 minutes, which I will share with everyone here. Give me 1 second. Oops, I don't know what's happening. Can everyone see the timer? Okay. Mike, you can begin your 3 minutes. Oh, actually, I don't know that we can hear you. Don't, yeah, we still can't hear you, Mike. If you want to type in the chat if there's any volume issues, sound issues, let us know. We could probably come back to public comment.
No, still, oh, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can hear you now.
All right, I found it.
Okay.
Sorry for the delay and the confusion here.
All right, go ahead.
Good morning, committee. My name is Mike Kozar. Most of you know who I am. And if there's members of the task force that don't, be glad to talk. We'd love to talk with you. For the record, I founded the Nevada HOA Reform Coalition and have served on multiple terms with boards, large associations, to include those declarant control. I want to start with process because process affects substance. I remain concerned this task force has not made a serious, good faith effort to obtain meaningful homeowner participation. 4 days notice may satisfy the legal minimum, but it is still only the minimum. It should not be the standard. This meeting was planned, anticipated much earlier. Task force members knew it was coming. Homeowners could have been told earlier, even if only the date and expected topics were available while final materials were being completed. Notice matters even more because of what's on this agenda. These are not minor housekeeping issues. These are issues that can affect homeowners' rights, board authority, transparency, future decisions. I've submitted 4 letters addressing those today. I assume many, likely most task force members have not had a real chance to read them because I had to work over the weekend just to get them in. That short notice window makes a difference. This is part of the problem. I'm going to touch briefly on the agenda items. Agenda item 1, definition of meetings. Come on, folks, just define meetings. It's been there for decades. Let's close that loophole. Let's don't preserve it. Okay? Board meetings are not merely making decisions. As far as the second one, capital improvement, same thing. Just define it, make it clear. What's presented to you right now isn't clear, it's convoluted. I've provided suggestions. It follows the advisory opinion 1601, uses phrasing out of 116.345, and incorporates the task force suggested cost threshold concept. Third, owners have a right to be placed on the agenda and receive a response. This is a basic accountability and plainly what lawmakers intended. Let's stop playing games with it, define it. Privilege is not a catch-all excuse for no response. Lastly, and finally, as my time's running out here, ADR is the biggest thing this task force can work on and fix. Homeowners may technically have a claim, but if the system does not provide a realistic way for them to obtain timely, affordable decisions, that right is worthless. Okay? Arbitration was considered before and rejected. Let's go back and put the petition back where it belongs. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to give public comment? Okay. Looks like we are going to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to the chair, Director Sanchez.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that. For the record, that was Amanda Flacchini. Moving on to agenda item number 3, that's presentation and discussion. I'm going to turn it over to Administrator Shrath Chandra for the introduction of our presenter.
Good morning, members of the task force. Director Sanchez, Shrath Chandra, Administrator for the Real Estate Division. Michael, member Buckley, made these introductions for us. We're really happy to welcome Bill from Florida, and he's graciously afforded some time to talk through some of the steps that they took based on the condo tragedy there. But Michael, I'll turn it over to you to just give a quick, brief intro. And Bill, we'll keep it to about 15 minutes, maybe. We want to be respectful of your time, and then maybe open it up about 5 minutes for questions. That document you provided is so comprehensive and interesting. I was just looking at it through this morning. I think there's a lot of information in there that we can kind of parse through, but just big picture for us so we understand it. And then we'll kind of open it up for a few questions. And then again, thank you in advance for your time. Michael, floor is yours.
Thank you, Sheriff. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Bill. I've known Bill for a long time through the American College of Real Estate Lawyers, through the Common Interest Community Subcommittee or Committee at ACRL. And Bill is the president-elect of ACRL coming for the next year. He's with the law office of Carlton Fields and is the chair of the firm's government law and consulting practice and managing shareholder of their Tallahassee law office. He's an adjunct professor at University of Miami School of Law and director of the University of Miami's Ralph Boyer Institute on Condominium and Cluster Development. He represents developers and has also been involved quite a bit in regulatory, both state and federal, and especially the recent changes in Florida law. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Bill Sklar.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to the task force. Does everyone hear me well? I just want to make sure. Thank you. I want to applaud the state of Nevada, this task force, and the Department of Business and Industry in undertaking what you are undertaking. It is a very compelling and important subject matter. If I forwarded to you, as the chair indicated, the task force report. I want to give 1 minute of background and then get into the substance. And I see the 3 areas specifically on your agenda you want me to address, and it will do so all within 15 minutes. In 2021, a horrible tragedy resulting in 98 deaths occurred with the collapse of Champlain Towers South, and our task force was impaneled within days after and presented the report you received about 100 days after that to Governor DeSantis, the then President of the Senate and Speaker of the House. But at first, we had to deal with the enormity of the problem. And this is very important to understand. In our case, at the time, we had 912,000 condo units over 30 years of age with roughly 3 million residents. And then we said, this is very serious. Not the fact that we have aging condos and aging structures, but the consequence of that. Unlike any other class of property, there has to be an understanding. In public buildings, schools, private office buildings, hotels, residences that are owned by a landlord, a uniform, there is a third party looking at the maintenance, the management, and what is being done to maintain the property. Whereas in a condo, as you know, we rely on the intention, the good faith intentions of volunteers who serve as a board of directors, and therefore human nature. Let's not spend our neighbors' money. Let's not special assess. Now, let's not raise assessments. So Let's keep it under wraps. And that's what happened, unfortunately, in Champlain Towers and throughout the state of Florida. So the first thing we grappled with is the duty to maintain. Yeah, it's in our statute. It's in your statute. But the point is, what does it mean? What is the standard of maintenance? And in Florida, we found there was a lack of a uniform standard of maintenance, which was alarming. What it means to one person may be very different than another. Second, there was a lack of inspection. I mean, in Miami-Dade County and Broward County, Fort Lauderdale area, there were 40-year recertification that efforts on older buildings that focused on electric and plumbing. And with understaffed building officials, not their fault, just budget constraints. So there was no enforcement, no uniform method of inspection, no uniform standard as to who were the qualified inspectors. These were huge issues. And the whole role of the board, the fiduciary duty of the board, which you have in Nevada, we have statutorily in a common law in Florida. So we went forward to address this, 19 meetings, dozens of witnesses and testimony and members of the legislature and staff members and experts. So that said, what we came up with in legislation in 2022, 23, 24, and even in 25, but mostly in those first 3 years, were enhanced statements of the fiduciary duty to maintain, the requirement for milestone inspections for buildings that are at least 30 years of age, and those that, not your issue, but within 3 miles of the coastline, 25 years of age because of salinity and resiliency issues and flooding issues, etc. And those milestone inspections had to be performed by either a structural engineer or architect, wherein we discovered we only had 625 licensed structural engineers in Florida for 21,000 associations. Major problem. So then the debate became expanding who has the qualifications. And there were certain reserve analyst requirements, and it was expanded beyond licensed architects and structural engineers. Still an issue to date, but it happened. We gave all of the associations the responsibility to conduct those milestones and what I'll talk about, SIR, Structural Integrity Reserve Studies, a little over 2 years. The legislation was passed in 22. We gave them till the end of 24. And frankly, it was insufficient. It was kicked forward till the end of 25. And now we are fully within, you must have what I'll describe as the milestone and the Structural Integrity Reserve Study. So what is this milestone? What does it consist of? It's comprehensive. It is an inspection of roof, structure, load-bearing walls, fireproofing, elevators, heat and cooling, plumbing, electrical, swimming pools or spas, seawalls, pavement and parking, drainage, painting, irrigation, waterproofing. We did not, as you've read, we're not qualified to investigate the causes of the collapse. That is still being investigated on a major grant to NIST, a federal agency, and I've testified before them twice now, and I think by the end of the year we'll have some findings. But there were multiple causes, we all know that. And it had to do with the fact that there was known to be concrete spalling. There was known to be what are called rebar blowouts. There were leaks of the pool into the garage, above the garage, and planters that were not sufficiently draining, all weakening the structure, all creating contributions to that. So it became apparent, and this was known to the board, and I can't stress the fiduciary duty because it's been enhanced by the Florida legislature in the past 2 years to specifically hold the board individually liable for the production of those SIR studies, structural integrity reserve studies, and distribution of those within 45 days of receipt to all owners, and establishing the reserves required. So the milestone study is as to the condition. We now hold developers responsible in a turnover report that mirrors what's in the milestone. Upon turnover, in Florida, turnover is at 90% of sales of condos or within the most 7 years, mostly for phase or staged condos. But a turnover report, a milestone inspection covering all the categories I briefly mentioned covered in the report. Now, the structural integrity reserve study is about something else, but it's very similar. It is not the same. We had a statute, we still do, that allowed the waiver of reserves annually, but we only had 3 categories: repaving, re-roofing, and repainting. And those discretionary items above $10,000 capital expenditure discretion of the board. And annually, the kicking of the can down the road became the problem. Let's not spend money of our neighbors where we don't need to. Well, imagine if in individual homes, 10, 20, 30 years, you didn't look at your roof or allowed it to leak or other things, didn't eventually paint your house or waterproof it. It would deteriorate. And when you're talking about structures that are, in our case, near a coastline, you have different, conditions environmentally. But the point is, things need to be maintained. So we enhanced the maintenance. We required these studies by qualified reserve analysts or structural engineers or architects. And based upon those reports, which are copied to our state agency, the Division of Condominiums, Mobile Homes, and Timeshares, that regulates, they're not enforcing, but they're collecting the data, which is now all public record on every condominium, 3 habitable stories or higher. And those SIRs now govern how funding of reserves for all the categories exist, not just the 3 I mentioned that were in our statute for almost 50 years. There is a big controversy in Florida, and something the task force and I disagreed with the legislature, still do, and that is the leadership said full funding, no more kicking the can down the road, no more waiver. And we said, wait a minute, this is going to foist or bring a financial burden on those who can least afford it. So let's gradually fund these reserves. We said 50% over 5 years, even over 10 years, and it was full funding. There's been a drawback of that, but it's not clear under our statute. And now it's the amortized over the estimated useful life, like any qualified reserve report. So we recommend that there be qualified reserve reports for those categories that will deteriorate. Doesn't have to be every category, but a baseline has to be established. So older buildings can be inspected on a uniform standard, maintained with a fiduciary duty to back it, and that there are structural integrity reserve type of studies with funding recommendations based upon estimated useful lives from qualified reserve analysts, and that there be gradual funding over a period of time to allow sufficient funds to replace the roof, to increase the waterproof nature, the concrete stability, etc. Now, specifically, you asked me to address a few things: mandatory director training and qualification. And in fact, we legislated this just 2 years ago. We require board members, in addition to written certification that the director has read and will uphold the association's governing documents, a 4-hour approved curriculum covering milestone inspections, structural integrity reserve studies, elections, record keeping, official records, financial literacy and transparency, levying of fines, and notice and meeting requirements. A new director must submit proof within 1 year of being elected or appointed, or 90 days post-election that they've gone through this. Directors elected before July 1, 24 had 1 year to comply. The education certificate's good for 7 years, as long as the board member serves without interruption. And each board member must complete a 1-hour legal update course each year and provide a certificate of completion for same to their association secretary for inclusion in the association's records. This was just passed in 24. So we're now implementing it. But you could tell it's a robust director education requirement. Most community association law firms were happy to provide this. It's a way of, frankly, procuring clients, and it's showing, what they know. And so many volunteers to get on board of this education. Your second category was old buildings, structural integrity, and inspections. I mentioned that. We've gone through a lot of changes in our statute. For instance, in our case, it's now, as of last year, 3 habitable stories. So the parking garage is not considered a habitable story. So it's 3 or more must have these SIR studies. There's a debate as to whether structural components, be they girders or certain components that are not likely to be replaced. But the point is they need to be inspected. And if they are deteriorated, the remediation or deferred maintenance must be performed. So I've mentioned structural integrity reserve studies separate from milestone inspections. You set an objective time period. You set an objective for standard for the qualifications of who's doing this. They're delivered within a certain time period. They become official records of the association. They're affirmatively, proactively distributed. So this is not hidden. It allegedly was hidden for years at Champlain Towers South, Surfside. And they knew because they didn't want to have a $17 million special assessment. And we know what happened. I mediated cases of 50-year-old buildings on the ocean that were in worse shape than Champlain Towers, that were patching their 40 to 50-year-old roofs. And I reminded them of the tragedy that had occurred within miles of where they were sitting to try to get them. What else has happened since? So the funding mechanism becomes important. You have assessments, the sensitivity to being market competitive. You have special assessments, which create a financial burden, even if they're phased in. But also banks have now become willing, at least in Florida, to have revolving lines of credit. When there's a SIRS, when there's a milestone, when there's a third party to administer the repairs, to make it more affordable, to at least amortize or spread out the debt payments so it's not an immediate and financially detrimental burden on unit owners. So that's how we've dealt with it, and it is being still dealt with. We're now in the process of finally just administering what are these changes that I've described. Aging condos and inspections, the third item. I think my comments sum it up. There has to be a maintenance standard uniform. Building officials have played an interesting role and still again evolving. Separate from the funding and insufficient staffing, the testimony we took, it was eye-opening. Well, unless we got a call that there was for instance, a visible crack in the stucco, we'd send a drive-by of a non-engineer. And part of milestones are phase 1 and phase 2, like environmental reports. Phase 1, is there a visual? And if there's a visual, you go to phase 2. You go to testing by the engineer. So I would state to you that there needs to be an objective standard for maintenance, an objective standard for inspection based on time period, age of buildings. There needs to be an objective standard for the structural integrity. We recommend reserves. We strongly recommend reserves for all the reasons I've stated. With that, there are many other things, and we've created stronger fiduciary duties to implement this, which are now being tested in Florida because they've gone into effect in the last 2 to 3 years. With that, I'll be happy to open it up to questions.
Bill, thank you for that. That was really informative. Do we have any members of the task force that have any questions? Michael, I saw your hand go up first.
Thank you. Bill, when you're talking about funding, I was thinking about the PACE funding that you could do for energy improvements and stuff like that. Was there any looking into that for this kind of thing for this?
Michael, we recommended that. We recommended federal funding for infrastructure be actually applied for this. The federal funding never came through. There were 2 bills by Florida congressmen that didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. But yes, PACE funding in particular. In Miami-Dade County Commission, I testified before them and worked with them on this. They adopted a pilot program, only a few $1 million, but the money was well spent. And we passed just last year, and again, an amendment, a condo safety first program, very much like PACE funding. So there's state money available or matching funds. So we've tapped into, we're either very cursed or very blessed. I like to think blessed in Florida. We actually have a budget surplus. Not getting into politics, why or who or what, but because of that, it was easy to get funding, frankly, in response to the tragedy and the implementation of these measures. But yes, PACE funding, unfortunately, in some places, PACE funding for energy, like solar and such, was frankly abused, and there was a stigma in some quarters, but we've gotten over that through requirements and administration of it. But that is a very good suggestion.
Assembly Member Kusama.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the information. My question is twofold. What happened in your example as far as, was the board members sued for their lack of taking care of these deferred maintenance and items? And along with that, you're implementing board training, you're implementing legal training for them to understand what their issues are. So along with that, are you now having trouble with people serving on the boards of condominiums?
Assembly Member, is it Kusama?
Kusama,
Yes. You're absolutely right in pointing this out. What occurred was everyone was sued, and it is we had the largest settlement of over $1 billion by the judge. Brilliantly structured a settlement. When I say everyone, engineers, board members, all the homeowners, condo owners, policies tendered their coverages, and consultants, the lawyers involved that represented the association for not disclosing the report and such. And it was the largest, I can't say nationwide, but it may very well be a settlement in certainly Florida history of over $1 billion to the families and even survivors. So, but your second comment's the most, I think, telling. Yes, this has discouraged people from serving on boards. I candidly say to someone or a friend or such who says, I'm going to join the board of that association. And I said, have you had a psychiatric examination? I'm saying that jokingly, but I understand. So what does that mean? Let's get practical. There has to be good D&O insurance. Our laws have actually protected directors. Our courts have said absent fraud, criminal conduct, or self-dealing plus unjust enrichment, we will not hold directors liable for breach of fiduciary duty. Meaning, our leading case, there wasn't enough money to rebuild after a hurricane, and there was a deficiency. And yeah, the board was somewhat negligent or relying on their insurance agent, but they were not held liable for breach of fiduciary duty. So we have a high threshold before you get to the acts that would constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. That has saved the day in still enlisting people to serve on boards. But depending upon what your law is on fiduciary duty, yes, it's certainly very discouraging, because when you're told, when we basically have enacted enhanced penalties if you don't get that SIRS report, if you don't distribute it, if you don't set up the reserves, if you don't fund the reserves or try to, it's an automatic liability. So the two things we do is we have a high threshold for liability, and we have good D&O insurance that's still available in our insurance markets. Good questions.
Assemblymember Kasama, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I don't know how to get my hand down.
Any other task force members with any questions for Bill? Well, Bill, thank you for your time. I really appreciate your information that you provided to us.
Yes, you're very welcome. And if there's any follow-up or further discussion, Michael knows where to find me, or any of you can find me, and I'd be happy to be helpful. And again, I commend you for your effort, whatever your recommendations are. As you can tell, these are essential, important safety issues, and I wish you well in coming up with your findings and recommendations. It's quite a task, but I'm glad you're doing it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Chair
Okay,
Sanchez, just a quick comment, no question, just a comment.
Yes.
Bill, thank you for your presentation. I represent the Community Association Institute, CAI, and we have been working on a draft bill for the state of Nevada. I'm currently going through the process of getting stakeholder feedback. We've met with the Association of Structural Engineers. They provided some feedback. We have a couple other stakeholders, Nevada Justice Association, realtors, builders, to get feedback on. I'd like to present this bill draft to this task force. I would defer to the chairman and members if you'd like to see it on the next agenda, but we certainly are working toward Bill getting something codified here in the state. It's a little complicated with the stakeholders involved, but we're working on it.
And let me make one comment, Mr. Gordon Garrett, in response. CAI was very much a part. If you read, if you get a chance to skim through our report and all the stakeholders, you mentioned several of the categories that we had before us, add in insurance and the Association of Building Officials and a few others to the categories you mentioned. But where CAI came in handy very much, they made the suggestions of enhancing who was qualified and presenting the qualifications for who was doing these inspections when we discovered we had a shortage, if you will, of structural engineers, at least in our state, based upon the numbers, as I indicated. So you've got some of the rights. There may be other stakeholders, but you mentioned many of the good stakeholders that need to be involved.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Gordon. Any other comments on agenda item 3? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to agenda item 4. That's the discussion of possible action. I'm going to turn it back over to Administrator Strath. Chandra.
Thank you,
Oh,
Chair.
I see. Sorry, Administrator, I just see that Assemblymember Kasama had raised her hand.
I'm so sorry. I was just going to add that I would very much like, I think it'd be great for the task force to see your draft legislation that you're proposing. I think that would be great for us to have as part of our agenda in a future meeting.
Great. We'll make note of that and be sure that it's on our next meeting. Thank you. Go for it,
Thank you,
Shara.
Chair. Shara Chandra, Administrator for the Real Estate Division. So jumping back on the agenda, so the next 4 items we've kind of talked through, at least the first item here, I believe the last time we spoke, we were trying to get some kind of a discussion going and consensus, and I think we still have a few things to talk through. So the agenda item has an attachment that kind of Crystal put together of where we left off. And so again, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But this one is a continuation of an ongoing discussion. And so Crystal will kind of take lead on this and walk us through where we are and then kind of facilitate a discussion. But don't want to take too much, but just want to get some thoughts around this item. And then we'll move to 2, 3, and 4, and 5, which I think we need to take some action on. So Crystal, it's all yours.
Thank you, Administrator Chandra, Senior Deputy Attorney Crystal Keegan for the division. So that's right. So at the last meeting, we introduced this topic to the group so that we could have a discussion about whether statutory clarification to NRS 116.31083, which is meetings of the executive board, was necessary. And we've provided the points from that discussion under the summary of recommendations. And to clarify, because there was a public comment submitted for this meeting that was confused and incorrectly assumed that these were the division's recommendations. But as we know, these were compiled from the members' points made at the last meeting. And as we recall, we didn't get to a clear consensus last time. So here it is. We're bringing this back for further discussion. And to facilitate that, we jotted down a couple of questions under the 4 additional discussion section. So to start, we heard from the ombudsman last meeting that her office gets questions about this. And so the first step, I guess, is to determine if the existing statute is sufficient. So last meeting, we noted that the division, we have an advisory opinion out there that's 11-1, and it provides that board members have a fiduciary duty that generally disfavors non-public private voting. And as the opinion provides, NRS 116.31083 applies broadly to meetings of the executive board. It doesn't distinguish between formal board meetings and informal workshops. Instead, when a board workshops or whatever you want to call it, the focus is on whether there's a quorum of the executive board, and if that board discusses association business, then the workshop must comply with the statute's notice, agenda, and minutes requirements. And I'll note here that this statute focuses on the necessity of action rather than the dollar amount or budget percentage. And I know there was some discussion of that last time. So we have NRS 116.31083. We have the advisory opinion 11-01. We have NRS 82. We have the governing documents. And if the members determine revisions are necessary, the next discussion would be, what would this look like? And it sounded like from last time, as you can see in the summary of recommendations, that some of the points from the members didn't think defining meeting would help and instead suggested clarifying actions outside meetings. And so with that, I'll turn it over for discussion to the members. Thank you.
Any task force members have any points they'd like to bring up? Go for it, Michael.
Thank you. First, I kind of a general remark, and I think it kind of takes off on what Mr. Kosar says, and that is, it seems to me that we should be making policy decisions rather than writing laws. And I know, and I didn't look at it, but if there is a regulation, there's a whole process in the Administrative Procedure Act where that regulation is proposed, it's gone to public comment, and there's adequate time for discussion of that. So to me, I think we should be focusing on policy. The other thing that I was curious about, and it actually from Mr. Kosar's attachments was that I see that in 2003, the division tried to amend and bring out a definition of meeting. And there was a lot of discussion. And basically, as I read that, the minutes for that hearing, it was in 2003, the division was really trying to clamp down on workshops, and there was much discussion how valuable workshops are to board members. And also I looked at it, it occurred to me, there's a definition of meeting in the open meeting law, and I don't think we need to, and the open meeting law has, I mean, there's a whole binder of, extensive comments on what, on the open meeting law definition of meeting. And it really focuses on whether the group is going to make a decision, not just be informed. So I do think, number one, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel and come up with new definitions. I do think it would be helpful along that we discussed last time, that there should be areas where the board can act without a meeting, if something's in the budget, if a contract's being renewed or something like that. And, it's there's a time limit to do something, that we come up with a policy on things like that. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Michael. Donna?
This is Donna Zanetti. I generally agree with Michael's comments, but to more specifically address these additional discussion items, I don't think it would be possible for us to do a credible job of identifying specific exemptions, or alternatively identifying what matters had to be discussed in a board meeting, because inevitably something would be left out. Nor do I necessarily believe that we need more or additional definitions. I actually think that the current definitions in the current 116 plus NRS 82 is sufficient to guide associations who want to act in a manner consistent with their fiduciary duty, the boards do, and that further definitions are not going to make that better. So that's my opinion on amending this section. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Do we have any other task force members that have comment on 4A1? Garrett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Garrett Gordon, I would just say ditto to Ms. Zanetti's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, Administrator?
Thank you, Chair. So again, the division's position on all of this has always been, we're basing it on the kind of the feedback and the comments we get, and the homeowners' experiences as they come through the ombudsman's office. So this is an area, I know Michael mentioned 2003, a little before my time, but still, this is an ongoing topic that we wanted to kind of bring and have a discussion. The goal here is not to nail down something that's then just going to get passed into law. That's not the idea. The idea is this is something that needs an ongoing discussion. And so I think exactly what we're doing is talking about the problem, because from the outside looking in, you're just like, it's so simple, and but it's not. And that's the whole point. If it was simple, then we wouldn't need all of us in this room. And so the goal here is to have this robust discussion and see different points of view. And then again, to Michael's point, maybe there is a policy, maybe there's an advisory opinion, maybe there is a consensus down the road, but this was the idea of this discussion. And if there was a strong sense that yes, that needs to be defined more in 116, or NRS 82 needs to be referenced as part of some clarification in statute, then that's maybe an option also. So again, not trying to close the loop on this, but just having that discussion we felt was
Ombudsman Merriweather?
Thank you. Just to add to what the administrator has said, again, my office sees complaints regarding this matter in which an association's governing documents are silent, and so therefore they defer to 82. 82 speaks of a majority of the board agreeing to take action outside of a meeting. Consent is given either before or after the meeting has taken place. And so what we're hearing from board members themselves, let alone the homeowners, is that a majority of the board will get together and exclude the other board members, number one, from even attending the meeting. And then the unit owners themselves are complaining that the boards are taking action outside of the meeting with not all of the board members even being aware of the meeting, and then the unit owners not being informed of the action that was taken from the board. And so while 82 does provide language on how a board can take action outside of the meeting, it does not further instruct the board on what needs to happen as far as how the unit owners are informed about the action that was taken, that consent needs to be given prior to the meeting, whether it's unanimous or majority, where it allows boards to rule out or keep out other board members. So 82, while it's available, it does seem to be lacking for the homeowners and for board members that are excluded. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the task force regarding 41A? Garrett? Actually, sorry, Michael.
Thank you, Michael Buckley. It just occurred to me, I was just looking at the statute that in NRS 82-271 says that a written consent can be made by a majority of the directors. And if memory serves, I was going to check. I think in a Chapter 78 corporation, the consent has to be signed by all the members, not just a majority. And I'll look and see if I could double check on that. But that could certainly be addressed what Sonia is talking about, where, you know, a majority of the directors, but not all of the directors approve something. That certainly doesn't sound right, where one of the directors is not even notified. And I'll double check on what NRS 78 says.
Thank you for that. Any other comments on this issue? Doug?
Thanks, Chris. Just one thought, I guess, for the for consideration. The counterparties that are dealing with associations and trying to rely on their authorization of agreements that they're entering into, I just think that needs to be considered as well as part of the conversation. The harder you make it to gain clarity for an outside party as to whether or not valid action has been taken, the greater the knock-on effects and additional costs of those counterparties and trying to verify the legitimacy of the action that's presented by whatever agreement, commercial transaction, settlement, whatever it may be that they're trying to enter into with that association. So, you know, in most for-profit corporate contexts, right? The authorization issue, Michael just mentioned Chapter 78, but Chapter 76 on LLCs and for limited partnerships. If there's some sort of dispute or inconsistency, usually the counterparties are allowed to take a presumption of validity, and that matter is something to be sorted out internally at the entity level for the party that's having that difficulty. The more you push that off onto counterparties, I think that again, the greater the cost, the difficulty for associations in trying to do business. So that's not to say that you know, this is a very important discussion and consider. I just think that also needs to be considered for whether or not we're creating additional challenges for associations trying to do business. So.
Thank you. Donna?
I have been frantically searching for it, but I have not been able to put my hands on the updated regulations that were passed in 2023. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sonia, but I think that they incorporated into NAC 116.405 some more clarity on what a violation of fiduciary duty would be, including violating the governing documents or the applicable regulations or statutes. So my question is, would there not be under 116.405 enough clarity for the real estate division to pursue these directors who are cutting out their fellow board members or taking some of these other steps that the ombudsman and various owners are finding objectionable? So if I can succeed in finding these, that would be a step forward, but maybe you know off the top of your head. And will they ever get around to publishing these regulations?
Donna, this is Sharat. So I think we just got them yesterday. So we, yeah, so we'll put it's up on the link should be active now, but they just got those codified. I think they're waiting for the division's comments back, yeah or nay, and so we'll look at it, but I think that just happened a day or two ago.
Ombudsman Merriweather, did you have a response for Donna or just the administration was good?
Regarding, Donna, are you speaking of Nat 405 in addition to Nat 405? Is that what you're speaking of? Additional language in that regulation?
Yes, the additional language that was added to NAC 116.405 to clarify what would be considered a violation of fiduciary duty back in 2023.
Nothing jumps off in my head as we speak, Donna, regarding 405. That was an addition to that. So I'll need to go back and take a look at that.
And this is Senior Deputy Attorney Crystal Keegan. So I'll kind of jump in here. So as far as this getting codified, we do have a deadline of April 27th to confirm that the regulation changes are correct. And so we anticipate that those will finally be published by the end of the month. And Attorney Zanetti, as far as where you could find the approved regulations on our website, red.nv.gov, under administration, under approved regulations, you would click CIC, and then that would be R-129-21, and that was improved in 2022. And I do see in section 4 that there were some amendments to NAC 116.405. And so if that kind of helps you to find those regulations and let me know what specifically you were referring to, I think that would help us in responding. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Michael?
Yes, just to follow up. So NRS 78315 subsection 2 says that unless otherwise restricted by the articles or bylaws, any action permitted to be taken at a meeting of the board of directors or committee may be taken without a meeting if before or after the action a written consent thereto is signed by all the members of the board or of the committee. In contrast, the nonprofit statute says, unless this is 82-271 subsection 2, unless otherwise restricted by the articles of bylaws, any action required or permitted to be taken by the board of directors or the delegates may be taken without a meeting if before or after a written consent signed by a majority of the board of directors. So an easy fix would be that if it's a 116 association have all the members sign it, just like a regular corporation.
Thank you, Michael. Assemblymember Kasama.
Thank you. I keep kind of cutting in and out, so I don't know if you called on me before. I have to keep rejoining. But it sounds to me, and I'm not an attorney, it sounds to me like we have some of the definitions we're looking for, perhaps in maybe different areas or clarification in the regulations, is what needed. And Michael Buckley just had a good recommendation, I think, for the one maybe to be added. But is it maybe a bulletin that we have to create that shows where we already have these things? Because we're called together as a task force because members of the public are frustrated. And so I think we have to come out with something. And if we have a lot of these definitions, maybe in different areas that are there, but is it a bulletin that needs to be sent to all CIC board members, an educational thing, so that they're aware of what their obligations are too? Just a thought.
Thank you. Ombudsman Merriweather.
Thank you. Donna, going back to R12921, when you're looking at page 6, while there were some amendments to 405, it doesn't appear that these would be applicable to the discussion that we're having regarding action without a meeting. While there were some updates, it doesn't include language such as board members excluding board members. And so when we look at action without a meeting, the changes in 405, it doesn't appear based on what's written in the draft that's not been codified or has been codified, but we just don't have it on our website, that this would impact the discussion.
Donna, do you have a response to Ombudsman? Oh, you're still muted.
Thanks, Donna Zanetti. Thanks to everyone's help, I was actually able to locate this. And I agree with you, Sonia. It's not adequate as amended, but it seems to provide an opportunity that if you wanted to amend NAC 116.405 to then include some statement about not excluding fellow directors from decision-making unless they have a conflict of interest, that this might provide an appropriate venue for getting at that particular conduct, which seems to be so much of an issue in what comes to your office.
David?
Yes, I have a question, and that is, if it's required that all board members sign this, some of our board members take vacations. Does that mean that we would not be able to operate unless everybody was there? And when we have discussions, they are excluded, not maliciously, but because they're out of town. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for discussion with respect to 4A1? Okay, thank you. Administrator, you want to move on to capital improvement?
Yes, sir. Shar Chandra, Administrator for Real Estate Division. So we'll move on to item 2, capital improvement. And again, Crystal, kind of I think where we left off was we creep towards a good consensus on capital improvement. Again, I want to kind of box this in by saying, again, the language that we decide on and we have a consensus on, again, has to go through a legislative process. So this is not going to end up in statute other than a recommendation from the task force, which then goes through the different houses and also the committees for review and public input. So again, our goal here is not to perfect this, but to kind of move us in the right direction to understand there's a problem and this is a solution that potentially could be in the form of legislation or a different form of codification. So having said that, Crystal, do you want to walk us through where we are?
Yes, thank you, Administrator Chandra. So, I'm looking at the time as well, but I do think it might make sense just to do items for a 2, 3, and 4 maybe together, since they're kind of part of a working consensus to draft amended language for those respective statutes. So, just to briefly recap, we have been discussing these items since this task force was reconvened by the director. It's been on the agenda for December, the 2025 meeting, and we talked about it at the last meeting in February. So it seems like we're almost there. And before I turn it over to the members to see if there's even any additional feedback, I think the goal, as Administrator Chandra said, is to just capture the essence of the recommendations from this task force so we can include it in a report that will be for the legislators' consideration, and it has to go through that whole process. And so hopefully we can commit these items to the final report today. And even if there's live changes, I believe we can accept those in a motion noting those amendments, and we can double check that with the Senior Deputy Attorney General, Phil Sue, who's attending today. So thank you.
Thank you for that. So just to recap, is there, we can go through, and we're talking about items 2, 3, 4, and 5. We'll start with the capital improvement. Were there any other comments on specific to that one? I think, hey, David, do you have your hand up from on this one, or was it from the previous? Okay. All right. Thank you. Michael.
No.
Thank you, Michael Buckley. I'm just curious why, capital improvements is defined in generally accepted accounting principles. It's defined by the IRS, and I'm curious why we need a new definition. The other question I had was looking at non-capital improvements, which is these may incorporate new technologies or materials that improve efficiency. You think of computer upgrades or new air conditioning systems. That seems to be a very broad way to exclude something that could cost a lot of money. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Looks like Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Garrett Gordon. Two comments that I've heard are, one, a little bit of confusion on the words preserve, restore, and maintain. I believe in regards to the statute and the use of reserves, and the ability to fund with reserves requires preserve, restore, and maintaining. However, if that language is now included in non-capital improvements, but the reserve language is included in capital improvements, it seems a little confusion has arisen in regards to those words. And if it is a reserve funded item, does it go into a capital improvement, or you can still preserve, restore, and maintain under non-capital improvement? So that was just one comment that I'd heard. And secondly, trying to come up with a recommendation for the cost threshold backstop, what that percentage would be. It looks like it's not defined at this point. It says exceeds a, and then there's in brackets defined. A thought was maybe 5%, but noting that, for example, one of the largest expenses for associations are street repairs. And that certainly is going to exceed that 5% likely for any association, on a yearly basis. And so is that the intent there to kick in street repairs, for this requirement, every single year? That's kind of the trouble with, coming up with a definition and redefining these items. It kicks up a lot more meetings and potentially work and analysis by the association. But thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's just some additional comments I had heard.
Thank you. Donna?
Donna Zanetti. I do think we need a definition of capital improvements separate from relying on generally accepted accounting principles or the IRS definitions, because their use of capital improvements includes what we consider to be reserve expenses. And reserve expenses, at least my understanding of what we're trying to do here, is not to bring in reserve projects such as replacing the asphalt or redoing the roof and require special meetings and approvals if those costs exceed a certain amount. But we're trying to address new items that the board or community may want to construct or install. So to the extent we're talking about new non-existent major components, I think subsection A is useful to us. I think subsection B and C are less useful. I guess my personal recommendation would be that we define capital improvements as something new, not existing, and stop there.
Chris, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Here I'm calling on Mark, and it's on my end that there's a problem. Sorry about that.
Oh, thanks. I just looked through 2, 3, and 4. What I'm seeing is legislative language that has the typical, blue text and green text, for changing. And my impression of what we were trying to do is, rather than introduce changes to legislation, that our purpose was to sort of ease the burden on legislators and try to tackle these issues kind of from a policy perspective, rather than trying to change legislation. That's just my take on it.
Thank you. Any other, Michael?
I just want to say, Michael Buckley, but I thought Donna had a good point, and I think just keeping A there makes sense to me, and I think that would to distinguish between what's already covered in the reserve study.
Any other comments?
This is Sharath. I think the only B and C, I mean, just talking about B, the only reason that I believe that was inserted is to essentially make it provide some clarity of what it's not. And so I think overall it actually helps when you know what's not in contrast to what is. And so that, and that also has to do with kind of the questions that we get, or the things that are kind of included and not included. So calling out certain elements, and again, this is not a representation of everything, but repairs and replacements of existing common areas are not capital improvement, right? And so that the essence of that language in B and C is to capture that. Now, again, C, the cost threshold, again, we are potentially putting language in there that needs further discussion. Again, like Garrett said, that what is defined is, again, left to more discussion, but the idea is, again, to capture that piece of it that could potentially be an area of improvement as to what that cost looks like, or a percentage. And so, I don't know, that's just my thoughts on B and C.
Michael?
Michael Buckley. I just think, as someone's mentioned it, I mean, I think it's difficult to try and put into a statute what, who knows what can fit in there. And it seems to me that the real estate division or the commission is best suited to, explain or come up with greater explanations or things that people have questions with, and do it through opinions or rulings or regulations. I think, again, I think you make a good point, Sharath, that, when you put into statute, you've now created another 50 words that people can have questions about.
Just one last comment, and then we can kind of think through this. Again, for us, for the division's perspective, we look at it, if it's not in statute, there's an enforcement issue that comes up, right? A lot of this is nice, we theoretically talk about it, but ultimately, when there is something that happens, division will look to statute or regulation for some form of enforcement or some form of compliance. And so that lacking, then again, it's like the gentleman that was describing the condo towers, is you're reporting into the division, and then that's where it stays. And so I think that's kind of the balance that we're trying to strike also.
Thank you, Administrator. Donna?
Donna Zanetti. So I just want to clarify what you would like for us. Are you looking for one of us to make a motion on a recommendation for amendment to NRS 116 capital improvement? Is that what you want to see happen today?
Yeah, I think what we'd like to do is on items 2, 3, 4, and 5 is to have the task force basically vote on including these in our final report as items that will be moving forward for additional consideration as we head into the legislative process. And to reiterate what the administrator had said, as we all are aware of, that process, has its own functions and things that will happen vis-a-vis meetings and committee hearings and such. But we want to have a final report, and we want to make sure that the items that we are discussing end up in that final report. And basically what we're asking is, do these warrant being included in that final report as items that need to be under further review?
Okay, to move this process along, I move that you include in the final report as a recommendation for an amendment to NRS 116-3115 subsection 9, the definition of capital improvement as provided in this draft subsection A.
So we have a motion on the table. Any, all those in favor? Or do I have a second? Sorry, have a second? Oh, sorry. Do we have a second on the motion? David? Okay, so we have.
I will second.
Thank you. We had several hands all at once, so I needed someone to say something, so appreciate that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Garrett, did you have a comment? I saw you flash.
Voting with my.
Okay. And any abstentions? Thank you. Administrator, moving on to 4A3 or 4A3, and that is a review of decision and recommendations for NRS 1163-1087 regarding units owners having certain complaints.
Thank you, Director. Again, 4A3, this was essentially the current, if you look at that first subsection, this is currently the way the statute is written. I think it's very unclear. I think there was a clear consensus that, yes, it is not clear. And so our intent here is not to rewrite anything other than clarify those two sections, which isn't really moving those two sections around a little bit to make sure that it's kind of clear on what the steps are. And then, of course, there was discussion around complaints placed on the agenda and some discussion around it. And so I think the green language there is just some additional clarification based on the discussions we had at the last meeting. So I think generally this is just a reorganization of those two sections to make it flow better, and also have there's some confusion on 1 and 2, and so that overlap is being reduced. And then also adding I think it's sub 2, sub 3, if the complaint remains unresolved after the board's response, to include some standard language informing the owner of the right to seek the next steps with our office. So that was a clarification on that. So Crystal, if you have anything else to add to that.
I do not, thank you.
Michael?
Yes, Michael Buckley. I was just looking at the last sentence of subsection 2, and it says that the association and a director shall not harass, intimidate, or retaliate. I would think there's a possibility that the owner will be after the board. I just think that should be mutual, rather than just directed at the board and the directors. So also include the owner. That, this is the process. Don't harass the board because they haven't made a decision or made the decision the one they want.
Donna?
I agree with Michael's comments, but my primary concern is with this phrase public dialogue. And I guess I'm seeking some input from the rest of the committee, but I would not like to see that interpreted as requiring the board to engage in a back and forth discussion with an owner concerning these alleged violations. I certainly, as an attorney, would not recommend my client engage in such open dialogue with an owner about what they allege to be a violation. I think it's appropriate if the owners use their owner comment period to state their position regarding the alleged violations, and that the board when it comes up on the agenda, provides the information to that owner that you're directing they provide within 10 calendar days. What their determination and findings were, what their basis in the governing documents or law was to make that decision. But if the expectation is that the parties will have a conversation, a free-ranging one, that is an interpretation that I could not support.
Thank you, Donna. Garrett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few comments on my side as well, maybe specifically to that subsection 2. 10 days is certainly quick for trying to come up with a written response. That association is going to have to hire a lawyer. They don't have one already. There's a concern that hiring a lawyer is going to increase costs to the association, because now the lawyer is going to have to come up with, 1, the board's findings or determination, and then 2, citations to the relevant provisions of the chapter. And so there is a little bit of a concern that now you're putting the association and its board more in a adjudication role of actually acting as a judge, and now having to hire almost a law clerk to come up and write a legal opinion and an order that now will be taken to to the real estate division and or court. And again, that could raise the cost to the association and potentially, assessments, and put a burden of 10 calendar days. Because we know, right? I mean, there's a number of small group of people who file a significant number of frivolous complaints. So there's really no limit here of Homeowner A files one complaint, doesn't like the answer, files it again the following week and the following week and the following week and the following week. How does a board do its business if it's caught up in a smattering of frivolous complaints and hiring lawyers and now issuing legal opinions and orders on these matters? So there's, to summarize, there's concern about the 10 days, really a big concern about the association doing its business in the event of numerous frivolous complaints, and now they're acting as a judge in regards to these complaints. And 3, the cost to hire a lawyer to comply with subsection 2. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Garrett. David, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Garrett Gordon covered most of what I had to say, except, and I see this as something that can be used against the board on an ongoing basis. And I think Michael Buckley's point to have it covered both the board and the owner. That was my comment.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Ombudsman Merriweather?
Thank you. While this can be a balancing act, 100%, you're looking at the board's protection, but you're also looking at the unit owner's right to be heard. And I think what we're finding, or what I found through this office, is there is a portion of complaints that are filed that just with the board speaking with the unit owner that has the concern, if there had been open dialogue, that complaint would not have been filed. And so while I understand the protection of the board, speaking with the unit owners in an open meeting and potentially discussing something that should have been discussed with their attorneys first, what the unit owners are finding is they're not getting any dialogue, written or verbally, from the board, and their concerns are just not being heard. So while this is truly a balancing act, it is still one that I think the board does have some type of obligation to the unit owners to have that communication when there is a concern about a violation of law or a violation that is taking place within the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Mark?
Yeah, I think that the language prioritizes the actions that have nothing to do with running the association. With this language, you're immediately putting on the front burner something that doesn't move the ball forward for the association and handling association business. I really think that this is something that should be handled by policy rather than by staff.
Director Sanchez, this is Shrat. So I think great conversation. I think what the division wants to clarify, and again, the 10 days is already in statute. It's already there. So what we're basically clarifying is the steps that it requires. So if you look at the original section 1 and 2, there's some confusion on the language. The intent of the language is the same, is rights of the unit owners to have certain complaints placed on the agenda. So this language here is not changing anything fundamentally. It's trying to clarify the process of how that gets placed. And to Donna's point, again, if you look at sub 2, it says nothing in this section compels the board to engage in public dialogue regarding the matters that are reserved for executive sessions. But they're basically allowing for this process. Now, currently, it already happens. It's just that there's confusion from the original section 1 and 2, where there's 2 steps. Some boards consider it as 2 steps, and some boards don't consider it as 2 steps. So if you look at the first section, a written complaint that has to go before the board, then there's a 10-day notice. So it's the same thing here. We're just saying it's as long as you provide that notice, then they get an opportunity to place it on the agenda. And then what the boards do at that point is completely up to the boards. Whatever they do currently would be the same practice if they choose to do so. And I think, yes, we could potentially add some language for to protect the board members too, vice versa, and that could be added in there. But I think that's the division's kind of clarification. I don't think the intent here is to rework anything beyond clarify 1 and 2 as currently in the statute.
Garrett,
Hey, Sharath, I agree with Sharath usually 99.9% of the time. And this is that 0.1% where I could see where subsection 1 is maybe reshuffling some of the language, but if you look at the proposed subsection 2, the current subsection 2 refers to, placing the complaint on an agenda for the board. It does not require, which is now the new language, that the board must now provide a non-privileged written response to the unit owner within 10 days of the meeting, following the meeting, which includes 1, the board's findings or determination, 2, citations of the chapter or NRS, if the complaint remains unresolved, language about next steps. So I would respectfully say it is a new process. It is a lot of new work on behalf of the association, and putting the association in the role of a adjudicator versus, I agree with the ombudsman. Hey, the current statute, I think, does a good job of making sure these complaints are put on agendas for discussion. It's absolutely critical to transparency and open governance. But once you start getting into adjudications, it gives us a little pause for concern for the substance of it and the resources to do it correctly. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a second opportunity.
thanks, Garrett. Michael?
Thank you, Michael Buckley. Just a question, and would adding the word in existing subsection 2 as an action item on the agenda, would that advance the to a solution? Just it's a question.
Administrator or Crystal, do you want to?
This is Senior Deputy Attorney Crystal Keegan. I think that the group can discuss that, but I had my hand up because I just wanted to clarify that on subsection 1 was really the cleanup of the clunky language and consolidating the original statutory sections 1 and 2, and that subsection 2 came from the members. It came from the group, and that's supported in the December 2025 task force meeting. So I just wanted to make sure we clarified that.
Thank you, Crystal. Donna, I know you had your hand up. Go ahead, and then I'll wrap it up.
Donna Zanetti, to respond to Michael Buckley's question about categorizing the agenda item as either an action item or a discussion item. At the end of the day, I don't think it makes a difference in that if you categorize it as an action item, the board may only decide to discuss. There may be no resulting motion and there may be no resulting action to be taken. I do think that as a matter of policy, owners should receive a response to their allegations that the board has violated either the governing documents or the statute. I understand Garrett's concern about the additional cost that this may impose on the associations, but my experience, while I can't say that owners have uniformly stepped down as a result of any explanation I've issued on behalf of the board as to why it took a particular action or didn't, I do think that it is part of good governance that owners get a response, and one substantive enough that it addresses their issues. Will this increase attorney billable hours? Yeah, it might, but I think it's an important public policy matter. in any case.
This is Sharath again, Mr. Chair. So I think Crystal brought up a really good point, and now that I reread it, so if the task force is so inclined, I think we could at least move section 1 forward, because I think that really addresses the confusion and for the homeowners and the two-step process. So section 1 is essentially rewriting 1 and 2 a little more clearly, so there's a clean process. And like you said, section 2 was based on some of the discussion we'd had at the previous 2 meetings. And so if that's too much of a, pill to swallow right now, I think it's a good discussion we've had, but I think 1 at least moves forward that confusion and provides some more clarity in the statute. And again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this is just a recommendation, which will then, go through the regulatory process, so statutory process. So, anyway, that's just my thoughts.
Michael?
Yes, Michael Buckley. I'll make a motion that we approve subsection 1 and also add that we recommend that there be included language requiring a response to the complaint in an appropriate way or something like that.
Thank you for the motion, Michael. Do we have a second on the motion? I see a second. Donna? All those in favor?
I have a quick point of discussion. Sorry.
Oh, yes, please go for it, Garrett. Yep.
Would the maker of the motion be willing to amend the motion to go back to your language that there's reciprocal language for the bullying, harassing, etc.? It's not only on behalf of the board, but on behalf of the homeowner?
Yes, thank you. I've made a motion to include that. Thank you.
So do we want to restate that with the entirety? Michael, do you want to?
Yes, I'll move that we approve subsection 1 amendment and that we also approve that appropriate language be added to require a response within a defined time to the complaint, and also that the language about the last sentence, that neither party harassing the other, whatever those words were, but you've got it right.
Okay. Do we have a second on the new motion? Donna? Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Moving on to item 4A4, and this is a reasonable time to prohibit use of common element, and I'll turn it over to Administrator John.
Thank you, sir. Again, I'll just we've had a lot of discussion around this, and I think where we landed, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll restate kind of the division's position on this. So the division doesn't have any problems with the boards exercising their duty. The only thing that we thought, and this is again the feedback we get from the Ombudsman's office and some of the stuff that comes across our desks, is to essentially say, we want to make sure that if a homeowner is restricted from using common elements or on voting, it be limited, and that be kind of more specific. So again, an owner or tenant violates any provisions of the governing documents, and then association is allowed to, except in the cases of when they are prohibited from using the common elements, we want to put a time limit on it, as long as the violations are cured and, whatever the fines have been paid, then there needs to be a cap on how long they're restricted from either voting or using the common element. So that was really kind of where we came at this. And so that, and then the further discussions, I know the discussions kind of ranged across different, and then I know Michael had brought up the voting issue also, but I thought this was kind of an important topic of restrictions that disallow people from using the common elements and voting, there needs to be some kind of, fixed time around. That's it.
Thank you, Administrator. Michael?
Thank you, Michael Buckley. Couple comments. I think I'm fine with this, and I focus on the language here. I don't think the word provide should come out, number one. Number two, the commensurate sanction. It seems to me that that should be following A1 and A2. In other words, the penalty should be commensurate with either one of those with the violation. So it shouldn't just apply to it should apply to the commensurate sanction. I think should be covering both of those. The other thing that caught my eye was that in subsection 3, which is not here, the association has to notify of the fine policy. And what about the subsection 1 policy? And same with subsection 4. There has to be a hearing before the fine under subsection 4. But I don't think it applies to penalties under subsection 1. So it just seemed to me that there needed to be some cleanup that, regarding what is the policy on any kind of penalty, and have a hearing before any kind of penalty.
Thank you, Michael. Assemblymember Kasama?
Thank you. My question, looking at this where it says per voting cycle, does that mean, is the intent here that, for example, the board could vote in for 90 days, that they can no longer use the facilities, let's say, but does it give them the option to, in 90 days, vote again for them to have another 90 days? I just feel like the board has to be able to have some kind of hammer if they're still continuing to violate the issues that the board has sanctioned them for. I just want to understand, can they re-up it again for 90 days and keep going that way? Is that what is intended with the voting cycle?
Donna?
This is Donna Zanetti. I can respond to that. As drafted, the ability to prohibit the owner from using the common elements, the recreational amenities, would continue so long as the violations had not been cured or the owner hadn't paid their fines. So there'd be no need to re-up it on a 30, 60, or 90-day cycle. It would just continue. If the owner had cured the violations, then the board would be limited to whatever the statute provided in terms of duration, whether that be 60, 30, or 90. The voting, as I interpret this, limited to one voting cycle at a time, refers to the owner's ability to vote on matters that owners are asked to vote on. So elections, removals of board members, the occasional CC&R amendment, or say special assessments or capital improvement assessments. And I am not clear myself as to what one voting cycle means. I assume it means at least 1 year through the next annual election. So that would be my explanation of what was intended. And I guess I would say that I think that your ability to vote should be suspended for as long as the violation remains uncured or the fines remain unpaid, regardless of the amount of time that takes.
Agreed. Thank you.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would concur with Ms. Zanetti that the remedy in regards to losing a voting right or losing a right to use a common element should be extended until the matter is resolved. The fine is paid, the assessments are paid, right? It wouldn't make sense to stop paying your assessments and only not be able to vote for one election. I mean, assessments are the essence of how an association runs. I would also note that there is some concern about the 30, 60, 90 days because there are some egregious situations where a year suspension is commensurate, where there's been an assault and battery at an HOA pool before. And if that occurs on the last day of the pool season, wintertime, there's 90 days of non-use. And then that individual can come back and use the pool the next year, when one could argue, or the board should determine, or could determine, that you lose your right for the pool for a year if you in fact, provide or commit assault on someone. The other day, an individual took a barbell in a gym and struck another individual. I would argue that that also maybe would trigger longer. And finally, the other day, a motorcycle was driven into a fitness center and caused tremendous damage. So I know these are extreme examples, but I do think limiting it to a 30 or 60 or 90 days might be too limiting. I think the commensurate sanction is good language, provides some subjectivity, but there are situations where longer than 90 days are appropriate in some situations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Do we have a motion?
I think we've got a couple of more folks, Director Sanchez, I believe Assemblywoman Heidi Kasama, and then
I see Mark's hand went up. I think Assemblywoman had her, Kasama had hers up from last time, but Mark, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I just, I'm not in favor of changing the legislative language, but it's more along the lines of if there's an issue that comes up, because the legislative language already talks about, being a reasonable time. And if there's an issue of a complaint of the board being unreasonable, I think it should be handled at the division level, as a matter of policy rather than trying to change the statute.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Do we have a motion to either move this forward or not? Assemblymember Kasama.
Thank you. I would actually probably not be in favor of having the days, the 30, 60, 90 after the discussion, and giving the board the discretion for what they think is a reasonable response based on some of the comments I've heard here too. And then maybe defining what a voting cycle is. Is that every annual vote? Those would be the changes I would be in favor of voting for.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion. And I would move to approve this subsection 1, but deleting the 30, 60, 90. I think just leaving subsection A as it is, and also, but number 2, adding the commensurate sanction as an overall guiding, and number 3, one voting cycle. I think that would be, define it as a vote of the unit owners, whatever that might be. But I would also add that I think subsection 3 and subsection 4 should also apply to actions under subsection 1 here.
Thank you for that motion, Michael. Do we have any amendments to the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those, do I have a second? No second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Oh, who is that? Sorry.
It's Heidi Kasama.
Oh, thank you, Member Kasama. So we have a second on the motion. All those in favor? Okay, all those opposed? So it looks like we have 4 in favor, 3 opposed. I'm sorry here. I'm going to make sure I see everybody. And any abstentions? Okay. Moving on to, the motion passes. Moving on to our last item on agenda item 4, and that is 4A5. And this one is to review review a decision and a recommendation for proposed changes to NRS 38, the ADR program. And I'll turn it over to Administrator Chandra.
Thank you, Director. Last one, I promise. And we've had some discussion about this, and I believe there was a bill in the legislative session the last time around looking to make changes to NRS 38. And we also heard from the court, the folks from the court about their program also. So the goal here, again, we've got a lot of public comment on this too. The idea was to create a forum for homeowners and HOAs to be able to resolve issues covering their governing documents, and and so currently the process is we have the ADR program, which has mediation, and we also have a program which is the referee program. Ultimately, the program that is most used is just, we don't believe it's very effective, because ultimately it is a party has to choose whether they want to participate in mediation. So when one party doesn't choose, you just go through the process, and then now you can move it on to the courts. And so if the goal here is to come to some kind of a consensus and a decision, we believe we've got to look at a different tactic. And ultimately, in some of the public comment, there was the cost issue, and the division understands the cost issue. And so the goal here is, if we are to move from a mediation, which the mediation program is also subsidized by the division. So it's $500, $250 for each party, and then there's a set limit of how much time you can use for that mediation. And so if we move towards an arbitration, again, we don't want to make it mandatory either. What we are trying to do is, it's a non-binding arbitration, but it would be the default mechanism. So you would default into arbitration, you would go through the arbitration process, and parties would come out with a result. Now, you can always challenge that result in court, but at least you walk away with a result. And so the division is also going to think about funding for that program. We obviously know there's a cost associated with, just like mediation and just like the referee program. It's no different. It's still going to cost money. It is still going to cost the homeowners money. But just like we do with the arbitration, the division, with mediation, the division is thinking about subsidizing it like we do that. The cost of the division is going to be more, but I believe this and the subsidy go hand in hand. So if this moves forward, then the division would also look to fund that program. And so I think they both go hand in hand. So I think we were not going to propose changes to NRS 38 and propose a arbitration program if we're not able to provide some form of subsidy. And so they go hand in hand, but conceptually, the goal here is to move to an arbitration where there are results. So ultimately, there is a public kind of question and concern, hey, do we come out with some kind of a resolution? And we believe this is the best step forward. The language here is just draft language of what we propose to change in the statute to make sure that it becomes the default program for the division. And that's just language, and some of that is going to change as we go through the legislative process. But that's kind of initially our proposal. We will look to work with the courts to see if we can adopt some of those program procedures, policies, best practices, maybe even look to using that same list of arbitrators that they use and collaborate with them to make sure that this functions just as effectively. That's all I have.
Thank you, Administrator Donna.
I move to approve for recommendation the proposed amendments to NRS 38 as presented.
We have, I'm sorry, who was that?
I would second, but I have a proposed slight modification to the language if the motion maker would consider it.
Of course.
I was going to mention this in discussion, but now I'm mentioning it in a motion. Looking at NRS 38.325, I think this is on page 7 of 11 of the packet, subsection 2. The last sentence currently reads, a person may not award to either party costs or attorney's fees. My suggestion would be a person may award a party costs or attorney's fees to the prevailing party, period.
I accept that.
And I second the motion.
Michael, did you have your hand went up around the same time that?
Yes, thank you, Michael Buckley. I agree with the motion in concept. I had a number of language changes that I wouldn't go into now, but I certainly approve the policy. I think also it's great that the real estate division will be looking at the short trial program. I think that was really helpful that we heard last time. And there's a lot going on with the Supreme Court rules on short trials and things like that. But so I approve. I would be in support of the motion, but not the exact language.
And Mark?
Just a couple things under NRS 38.320 number 1. There are 2 ors next to each other, so I'd recommend taking out the red or. And number 2 under NRS 38.330. Is it really possible to get a good arbitrator for just $600? Is there a way of changing that so that if the parties agree, they can hire a really good arbitrator, and maybe not limit the dollar amount, because if the alternative is going to court, that's tens of thousands of dollars. So maybe it's worth spending $1,000 or a couple $1,000 for a really good arbitrator as opposed to one that would only work for $600.
Director Sanchez, this is Sharath. Just so, Mark, just to clarify some of those items, that dollar amount is statutorily capping for the mediation program. It has nothing to do with the arbitration program. The arbitration program, we purposely didn't put any language in there because I think that's where we will design the program. And I believe when the court folks were here and they testified, it was $2,000 was what they cap it at. Obviously, costs could escalate, and our goal here is not to just keep it open-ended, just like our mediation program. We want to put a cost structure around it. It may not work for everybody, but I think what we're trying to do is 80-20, right? 80% of the folks that use the program, as long as we can subsidize that program for them to use, just similar to how we do the mediation. That's the goal. Now, if someone chooses not to use that arbitration or not use the subsidy, they're free to do that too. So the way the current program, if someone has an issue and they go through the process and they've already kind of done that process previously and were subsidized, they don't get a subsidy. So, but they're still free to move through that process if they so choose. So I think that's how we're going to design it. Maybe like Michael said, the language is not set. So at some point, statutorily, they may require us to put language in there that kind of, specifies the dollar amount of the caps, which is, which we will probably do. But right now, our working concept is $2,000 per arbitration. And then we'll that's when I said we'll use the court's best practices to see if we can align a lot of those things. Because I think if we do it individually, our costs may not line up. But I think if we partner with the courts, I think there might be a better way to do it. So anyway, sorry, that was my response.
So we have a motion on the table and we have a second with an amended motion by Garrett. We'll move that to a vote. All those in favor? And any opposition? Any abstentions? Thank you, Michael. We got that. Okay. Okay, so that concludes agenda item 4, parts 1 through 5, and now we're moving on to 4B. And this is for possible action. This is the approval of the February 25th task force meeting minutes. Do we have any edits to the minutes as written? Michael.
Thank you, Michael Buckley. There is on page 4, the bottom last full paragraph. There's a she missing in the second line. Advisory opinions, she explained.
With Mr. Chairman, if you're accepting motions.
One more correction or a comment, I think, and that is on page 5, the paragraph 4th to the bottom, Assemblywoman Kasama, and it refers to homeowner approval, and I think she was referring to board approval. And with those changes, I would move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, now we're moving on to agenda item 5, task force member general discussion. Members of the task force, do you have any general items you'd like to bring up?
Chairman?
Yes, Garrett, please.
I just wanted to make sure it was the consensus of the committee if I would provide our committee clerk with that draft language for the Surfside tragedy that's been approved in other states, for consideration by this task force for our state.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Garrett. We'll put that on the agenda for our next meeting. If you'd like to submit that into the clerk, so we can get it distributed out to the members of the task force and prepped for the public review as well.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Michael?
Thank you, Michael Buckley. I assume there will be future agenda items to talk about what Bill Sklar talked about, and also in terms of maintenance and also board training. And also, I'm sure many of you probably already saw it. I just thought I would mention it, and that is the Wall Street Journal article on April 9th. The subject was the cost of HOA fees is increasing rapidly, so that in many cases it's more than a mortgage payment. So I'm not sure. It seems to me we ought to at least discuss where we might be able to help or do something there.
Did see that article. Thank you for referencing that. Okay, so board training, HOA fees, got it, and the maintenance. Okay, Garrett?
Apologies to speak a second time. Just a quick question. As BDR requests come in for next session, is it, and I just know the answer to this, it's a legitimate, just a question. Is this task force reviewing those and coming up with, support, non-support, neutral, support with amendments? Or are we just really limiting our scope to kind of what we come up with? Or are we going to review these bills as they start coming in over the summer?
Yeah, good question. So the length of time that the task force will meet is something that we have yet to determine. As you know, the BDR process, it has a timeline that it, will begin for the agencies. It's starting kind of behind the scenes now. And then we'll run through the summer as we work through the governor's office and then, subsequently then into the legislative session. So, I think it's going to be a conversation for the task force. My intent is to, as we have, meaningful agenda items to continue to discuss, that we do so. I did not intend for the task force to run throughout the entire calendar year. There was a number of issues that we had that we've been discussing, and I think, we tend to, each meeting is, I found, very valuable, and the conversation has been very robust, which as long as we can continue that and there's interest, I'm happy to continue scheduling the meetings. It seems we already have enough for, a fourth meeting in terms of the agenda. But I think what I would recommend to the task force is that we kind of, each meeting, we look forward and determine what the topics will be, their desire to discuss those topics, and then move on from there. Michael?
Thank you. Yes, Chair, Michael Buckley. I wanted to mention that, so I'm chair of the real property section, and in June 16th, I think, I'm making a presentation to the Joint Interim Standing Judiciary Committee on real property proposals. And some of those proposals involve Chapter 116. Two things, really. One is trying to keep 116 up to date with the Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act. And secondly, one of the things that I'm just going to raise at that hearing is, 116 is so complicated, and there really is never time during the session where these issues can really be vetted and work on consensus, in that short period of time. So I'm just going to raise the issue that there ought to be some kind of committee or input group that keeps up to date on like uniform law changes or other 116 issues. I mean, this task force may be an example of something like that, but just to, try and keep a discussion going, because when you get to the session, it's too late. it's everything gets very controversial, and if there's adequate time to discuss ahead of time, there's a greater likelihood, I think, that we can make sure that the law keeps being looked at and improved and so forth. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 6, and that's public comment, and I will turn it over to Amanda Flacchini.
Okay, so Amanda Flacchini, for the record, we will be opening up public comment for everyone joining. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person at the discretion of the chair. Members of the public are encouraged to address the task force regarding any matter. However, no action may be taken on a matter. Comment may not be limited based on viewpoint. If you are making public comment via phone, dial-in number is 775-321-6111. Conference ID is 852-5 569-574#. And I will set the timer for 3 minutes. Give me 1 minute. And I think we've got my COSAR. Let me share my screen, the timer. 1 moment. Okay, Mr. COSAR, you can begin your 3 minutes. You are muted still. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yep.
All right, good comments, good discussion. But I'm going to hit some quick points here, and I'll start the most recent. You all decided to move forward on the arbitration program, but I'll remind you that in 2013, the legislature moved exactly away from that when they put together the program, which was the referee program, for the very reasons that it was too expensive and it would be cost prohibitive. Okay? There was actually zero discussion about why the referee program isn't the place to go and make it simply the default. That would be very simple. People could always go to arbitration. They could go to mediation, which I agree with the administrator doesn't work, having been through it myself, and select the low cost, which is usually typically correct for homeowners. These are issues of CCR interpretations, which they just need a neutral party to step in and tell them, you know, you're right or wrong, and that's probably going to solve the vast majority of your issues with homeowners. But you never even talked about it. It wasn't even mentioned. Why are we throwing it away? It's a good program. It doesn't get used. It's low cost and it's quick. Couple other points. I kept hearing over and over again, there's confusion. I must have heard that a dozen times. I also heard there needs to be cleanup. But I've also heard a couple of you, I think, hit on the right thing. Mark said it, Michael said it. Hey, that's regulatory stuff. Why don't we just employ the regulatory vehicles we have, the CCI commission that we have, the rulemaking authorities that we have under NRS 233, and clear up these issues? These have been decade-old issues: how to define a meeting, what a discussion should be, you know, whether. I mean, these are not things that you need to involve the legislature. I think Michael summed it up. They're just not timed by the time you get there. That's why they put a regulator together. And I don't think that's where you all should be spending your time, unless what you want to do is make the regulator actually start doing regulations. I want to hit one last thing on the way of in the way of discussions and workshops and so forth. The people that I talk to, their biggest complaint is typically with regards to the budget. Boards meet and work through the budgets in these workshops, and then all of a sudden out plucks this response that the board simply says, yep, we all agree, because they've been working on it. The homeowners don't know how the sausage was made. I'm not saying that they should be able to talk during the meetings. I know, I've been there myself. It's time consuming, but they should at least be able to observe the board going through those discussions, understand why their budget's the way they are. But many boards, too many boards, just lock them out. Okay? And so there's the biggest complaint, I believe, and it wasn't really addressed. So thank you very much. My time's up. Please, more discussions, but consider what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to provide public comment? Laura, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Hey, real quick, I want to first thank everybody. You guys are doing a great job at bringing up some detail. On the arbitration issue, I didn't hear anybody speak on, I've personally been through unsuccessfully the arbitration process. I was very disappointed in the person that I was assigned. I spent $7,500 for an attorney to represent me because that's what I was told I had to do. It didn't have to get to arbitration. My problem was the board president had a personal vengeance against me. So therefore I had to jump through all these hoops, including leading up to arbitration. And now I'm in civil court with them and have already passed $40,000. So I asked for a transcript of my arbitration. Why is there no transcript provided of what was discussed? Just even on my end, I know I'm not supposed to know what the other party's discussing, but I already know what the whole issue is because it's my issue. So I learned more about this arbitrator's Cocker Spaniel dog that sat in his lap during the whole thing on screen, telling me about what the dog can't eat, blah, blah, blah. And I got nothing out of it, not a single thing. So I would like to see some sort of transcript or something that the participant or the homeowner gets after spending that money, spending time, trusting the process, something that resolves the issue as to why this resolve was made. There was no decision made as far as when the party would be accountable or how they would be accountable, i.e. the board or the HOA management company. They were told to work it out on your own. That's what I got out of it. Not happy, but again, transcript on that. And then just a couple of the other issues where, well, I just want to stay focused on that. I'll bring the other issue up at the next meeting and have some more detail for you guys, but I'd like to see something done deeper on the arbitration. The judges that, or the people, the attorneys that you pick. One of the people made a good suggestion saying, you know, get people that will work for the $1,000 versus the 600, which I think is kind of, doesn't matter what you're being paid. If you're hired to do a job, you need to do the job, even if you accepted it for 600, 500, or 1,000. We need to represent the homeowners that are, you know, we're being not abused, but taken advantage of in a way. And then of course, defining the board members going to class, learning these regulations in more detail, because I think most of them are just using their own personal opinions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Anyone else like to provide public comment? Okay, with that, I will hand it back over to Director Sanchez to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the conversation today. I thought it was robust. We're on to agenda item number 7, and that's adjournment. So until next time, thank you.